Well, good day to you. It is February the 12th, 2021, and I hope you're having a great day wherever you are, and hopefully it's a little sunnier where you're at than where I'm at. Now, let me introduce myself real quick if this is your first time ever listening to this channel, because I don't want us to be strangers for very long. My name is Gary Willing, but what we talk about here on this channel is a lot more important than who I am. Okay, now what we talk about here is we actually have ongoing discussions through question and answer. We talk about the emergence of Maitreya and the Masters of Wisdom. We talk about why the teacher who made a promise to every religion to come back at some point is now here, along with not only himself, but along with his group of disciples called the Masters of Wisdom. What does it mean that they're here? And if you're like most people, what does it mean for you, right? Now, if what I'm saying is true, that the teacher who made a promise to the Christians to come back, and the Muslims and the Jews and the Buddhists and the Hindus to come back, right? If that's true, right, then you might be thinking that the teacher's top priority has something to do with religious belief, okay, because that has to do with the religions, right? Well, each religious group is expecting their teacher to come back in a certain way, okay, even though they don't realize that every other group has the same expectation in some way. They think that they're right and the other people are wrong and vice versa and all that kind of stuff, especially if you're really fundamental. But if you're just hearing this on the first hearing, you might be going, well, it must have something to do with religion. You know, maybe I have to change my beliefs. I mean, that's what he's about to say. Well, let me put your mind at ease. Okay, even if you're a fundamentalist Christian or Buddhist or whatever, there isn't even a priority where he wants you to change your beliefs, let alone his top priority. So his top priority for humanity, listen up real quick, is humanity must create peace. Our very survival depends on it for two reasons, okay? And I'm going to explain it here in a bit. You also might be hearing this, upon hearing this, you might say to yourself, there's no way we can ever create peace. I've been told my whole life that the world is too divided, it's too big, people don't like each other enough, people are too greedy, we're never going to create peace, right? Countries don't like each other. Well, what if I showed you, and you can do your own research on this and look it up for yourself, but what if I showed you that what the teacher is saying, that the path to peace is actually accurate, historically accurate, and has already happened at least once, and it worked, okay? So the teacher's path to peace is this, okay? You listening? Without sharing, there can be no justice. Without justice, there can be no peace. And without peace, there can be no future. That's the path to peace, and a path to a future, really. Now, if you look at the first step, okay, and this is what we got to talk about here on this channel. This is the most important thing, the principle of sharing. If you were brought up here in the United States, for sure, okay, your first impression of the principle of sharing is that's communism, socialism, or ain't capitalism, so it must be bad, right? Well, I'm going to tell you right now, it has nothing to do with any kind of ism, okay? And it's already happened before. So it has to do when a country takes the excesses of what they have and freely gives it to another nation to use for what they need. And then every nation has an excess of something that they can give back to either that nation or another nation as payment for what they took. And if we just did that, according to Maitreya, it would start to bring about justice, goodwill amongst the nations. Nations would start to trust one another, even nations that historically did not trust one another, and would eventually bring about peace, which will bring about a future. Now, why is peace so important? Okay, and then I'll talk about the historical effects of the principle of sharing. Okay, so the first one is the most obvious, right? Well, we could destroy ourselves nuclearly, right? Now, what you might not realize is that there are more countries than have been listed by the United Nations that actually have nuclear weapons. A lot of them have them under the table. A lot of them were given to them by the superpowers back in the day, right? United States and Russia, right? So any one of those nations could start a conflict, or there could be a conflict next to that country even, and it would cause that nation to get involved, which could lead, as a possibility, to a nuclear war, okay, which would cause the other nations to get involved and then use their nuclear weapons and so forth. So it'd be bad for everybody if that happened. That's the most obvious. The second reason is probably not quite as obvious to you, because it took me reading this information to kind of get it for myself, is we are facing an ecological crisis of biblical proportion. You know, they talk about climate change, but that's just one aspect of the ecological problem, okay? There's also nuclear radiation that's going on. We talk about that and how that's affecting everybody, because according to the masters, nuclear radiation is the single biggest killer on the planet, believe it or not. And then even if you don't believe in those two things, that's fine. You know what I mean? You can, walk around with your head, thinking happy thoughts your whole life. I don't care. But you can't deny that the world is polluted, right? You can't just go down to a little stream down the street from where you live and grab a cup and scoop up the water and drink it, right? Not without getting really sick. Well, imagine if you were living in a very poor part of the world and that's the only water source that you have is dirty drinking water, right? Pollution is the single biggest killer on this planet, hands down. And we must tackle it as a world. If we don't, our future is in jeopardy. Now, the reason why peace is so important is because the nations have to trust one another and learn to trust one another in order to tackle that problem. So that's why his priority of peace is his top priority. Has nothing to do with religion. I know people like to argue with me about the religious aspect of it, and I don't really give a crap, okay? Because you have your beliefs, and that's fine. I don't have to believe what you believe, and you don't have to believe what I believe. The most important thing to take from these videos is peace must happen. It's the most important thing that we can do. And, anyway, so let's look at it historically, why I'm saying and why the teacher is saying, most importantly, that the principle of sharing will lead to peace, okay? Now, it actually has already happened. And the most capitalistic country on the planet was the one that did it at one time. So the United States saw right after World War II that if it did not help out Western Europe, okay, it would be bad for not only the United States, but could be potentially bad for the whole planet. They saw that because they were in such a fragile state, if they were left alone, just to kind of get back, build themselves up by the bootstraps, as people like to say, that it could lead to anarchy in Europe, which would eventually lead to another Third World War. Now, at this point, we're at the higher rung of the ladder, because this was just a few years after the ending of World War II. Now we actually had the nuclear bomb, right? And so did Russia. So it could have meant that the two superpowers would have had to get involved, and then it could have been a nuclear war again, and so it could have been really, really bad. So what they did was, this is the genius of it. George C. Marshall, and it's known as the Marshall Plan, took an inventory of the excesses that the United States had and freely gave it to Western Europe to rebuild pretty much Western Europe from the ground up. And it did just that. And it rebuilt Europe rather quickly. It also allowed Western Europe to start to create excesses for themselves, which they paid back to the United States as payment of what they originally took, which gave an economic boom for the United States. Now, I say this in nearly every video, and it's important to hear even if you've heard it before, okay? We have a peaceful, trusting relationship with those nations. We have a better goodwill relationship with those nations than we have with any other nations on the planet. Germany has not tried to take over Europe again. It tried twice, didn't work. It didn't try a third time after this, right? England hasn't sent over boats to Washington, D.C. to, burn the White House. The United States hasn't gone and attacked Italy or whatever like that, right? And, Switzerland pretty much stays out of everything, but, but Spain hasn't tried to attack Portugal. We've had every one of those nations that shared, from all the Western European nations and the United States, Canada, all that kind of stuff, they have a more peaceful, trusting relationship, a goodwill relationship than any other nation on the planet. And from the master's point of view, goodwill is the lowest aspect of love. Now, we must have trust amongst all the nations in order to tackle things like the environment. If we don't, it's not going to get solved in time. That's why peace is so important. The other thing about things militarily, right? Well, there are nations that don't trust the United States and vice versa, right? North Korea and Iran are two prime examples, even Russia to some degree. If we just shared with them and them with us and other nations, the question that I'm asking is, would it create a more trustful relationship? Maybe not perfect, but would it create a more trusting relationship amongst those nations if we just shared our resources with them? I think the answer is yes. Would it have them trust us more? I think the answer is yes. So the most important thing is just to try. So anyway, that's the most important thing that we talk about here, because it is the most important priority that Maitreya has set for humanity. So, and since our survival depends on it, well, shoot, we better be talking about it until it gets done. Now, I want to get into some questions. And of course, if you have a question or two you'd like to ask, you can always ask your question by posting your question as a comment. If you want to do more research on this, I definitely recommend looking at the description of each video. I have links to various websites. The Share International website's a very, very good resource for this information as well. You can also ask me a question via email at searchforsigns@mail.com. That email is in the description as well. How about them apples? All right. First comment comes from Thomas Lynch. Well, good day to you. And he's quoting me, of course. You have just the voice to match your enthusiasm. Powerful indeed. Well, thank you. You're very kind for those words. And it is Maitreya and Babaji who said, and we certainly agree to, quote, be a dynamo of irrepressible joy. Wow, I like that. That's very cool. And the one thing that Benjamin Creme's master said about joy that has really stuck, and I've tried to take it to heart, is he said, fear and joy are equally infectious. And in this time of global pandemics, we know what infectious means, right? Well, you can infect people with joy, or you can infect them with fear. The choice is yours, right? So I choose to infect people with joy. Do I say I'm perfect at it? No. But hopefully we'll get there. Now, the other thing, too, about joy is when you recognize Maitreya on TV, when you see him in person, you will see a person who is manifesting joy like you've never seen before. And his joy is really infectious. So can't wait for everybody to start to experience that firsthand, for sure. Now, next question comes from A.K. Zin Somatic. Somaniac, sorry about that. Would you agree Maitreya is Jesus? Okay, I guess my question would be, in what way are you asking that question? So, on one level, yes, that's true. On another level, it's not. Okay, so, I'm not trying to do a double speak here, but there's nothing but unity, so I guess, yes, that's true, right? But I could also say the same thing about you and me. You and I are the same too, but yet are we really the same? Yeah, we're two different people, but we're one. We all share the same divinity, right? So Maitreya and Jesus share the same divinity, just like you and Maitreya do. And, I've said this in reference to people's concerns about Maitreya being the Antichrist. They say, oh, the Antichrist will exalt himself above God and say he's God himself. Not true. There's no way that Maitreya is ever going to do that. Maitreya he's never going to be above God. But what he's going to say is, he's not above you. You're not above him. We're all one. We're all brothers and sisters. It's just the level of manifestation of that divinity. Maitreya has been manifesting that divinity perfectly for eons. You and I haven't. We haven't started manifesting it perfectly yet, but eventually we will. And he'll tell you, yeah, you'll eventually be a master too. He already sees you being a master, whoever this person who wrote it. So when he sees you, right, and sees any one of us, he already sees all the lifetimes that you've had, to where you are now, to where you'll be in the future, and what you'll do far into the future. And that's what makes him so joyful, is he knows the potential of all of us. Jesus said himself, greater things than this shall you do yourself. And Jesus and Maitreya, the Master Jesus and Maitreya, will say in the very near future to every one of us, that is the truth of the matter. We are all sharing that divinity, right? Sharing that joy, that creativity that is God, right? Now, Maitreya was the first person of our humanity to become a master. And he did it eons ago. And he did it eons before written history, during the time of Atlantis. Now, most people refer to Atlantis kind of as a myth, but it was actually a continent and a civilization that existed for millions of years when the masters were out known for who they were. and taught humanity directly. And this was before the dark times, when the history that we know of, where we've forgotten about the masters. But Maitreya, according to Benjamin Creme's master, okay, is the first of our humanity to become a master, and he did it because he never wasted a lifetime. But he has experienced every aspect of human endeavor. So anything that you would consider to be the most pleasant experience or lifetime he's experienced, to the most awful, horrific lifetime he has experienced. If you've lost your child to some, illness or something like this, or accident, he's experienced that as a parent, at some point in his lifetime. He's experienced what it's like to be so despairing that he actually committed suicide, right? He's, everything. I mean, anything that you can think of that humans have to, us as humanity has to go through, he's gone through himself. And he will say that he is the guarantee because he did it and made it through and triumphed over it. You and I and everybody else will be able to do the exact same thing. Now, Jesus is a different soul. He's a different individual. And he was a very, very advanced disciple at the time that he was in Palestine. Maitreya had long been a master. Maitreya became the world teacher for the age of Pisces, just as he's as the world teacher for the age of Aquarius. But he wasn't able to speak to humanity directly because the masters weren't working that way like they are about to now. So he had to work through Jesus, and he worked through Jesus through the form and the process called overshadowing. It's a method that most humanity is totally ignorant of, but it's a scientific form of telepathy where the master could be in one part of the world and a little bit of his consciousness can work through a disciple, whoever it is. But they have to be very advanced to be able to do this. It can't just be an average person. And somebody like Jesus, his consciousness would step aside and let Maitreya speak to the people. And that was the service that Jesus gave to the world, really. Now, there were times, according to the Ageless Wisdom teachings, that Jesus was teaching the people, and it wasn't Maitreya. And there's other times that it was Maitreya speaking to the people, and there's other times that both of them were speaking at the same time. And the higher apostles, like Peter and John and James, knew about the overshadowing process, but even some of his closest disciples didn't even know about it, according to the Ageless Wisdom teachings. But it's a process that these masters use all the time. And Benjamin Creme used to be overshadowed by Maitreya and his own master. Disciples like, and this is kind of unique, it's kind of cool, is Mozart was overshadowed by his master, and his master didn't give him the audio of the music, but he actually showed him the music in a very colorful way, or some kind of unique kind of way that Mozart was able to interpret it, write it out in on the scores of the paper and so forth. And that's why one of the historical accuracies of the movie Amadeus was there were actually original scores of Mozart that had no additions to it. And he said it was like, and this is Hollywood drama, but there's some truth to this, is there were no additions, there was no scratches and editing. It was just perfect. And same thing with Shakespeare. Shakespeare, there were first edition Shakespeare writings that were perfect with no additions or no edits or anything like that. You see what I'm saying? And it was all because they were being overshadowed by their master at the time that they did it. Jesus, when he became a master, not long after he was Jesus, overshadowed the Prophet Muhammad. And according to the Ageless Wisdom teachings, he is actually the author of the Quran. So you can agree with it or not. I'm just putting it out there for you to consider. But yes, so to answer your question, yes and no. So like I said, it just depends on which way you're asking it. Okay. All right. Next comment comes from Zen. What the world needs now is love, sweet love. And Zen, I'm going to have to say, please refrain from quoting Burt Bacharach. And the reason is because that song is going to get stuck in my head for days. What the world needs now. Anyway, is love, sweet love. Yes, that's true. And it's interesting you said that, because you were responding to the title of the last video, What the World Needs Now is Peace. And even Maitreya, when I had a Maitreya experience where he said, where I was talking about the time that I was writing out autographs in Japan back, 93. And I was touring Japan with a group, and I used to sign my name with a peace sign and a heart and a happy face. And to kind of summarize it really quickly, when I got back to Atlanta, I was lost. I was going to meet a friend of mine who was about 5 or 6 miles away from this part. And at this point in my life, I had hardly ever been to this side of town. Since then, I've actually lived in that part of town, so I'm quite familiar with it now. Would never get lost in that part of town now, but, what was it, 27 years ago? Yeah, I was pretty lost. So I pulled into this gas station, and I needed to call him. Okay, now, for those of us who are under the age of 20, you might not have realized that there was a point in everyone's life prior to when you were born when people didn't really have cell phones. And there was things called payphones, where you actually had to put money into a dirty, grungy, oftentimes riddled with graffiti box with a payphone in it, and hold the phone away from your ear because you didn't know who was just breathing all over this phone prior to you getting there. Anyway, so that's exactly what I had to do. I put a quarter into this phone. It was just littered with graffiti, and I was about to dial my friend Harry's number, and written in black magic marker on the phone, it said, "To Gary." There was a heart sign, a peace sign, and a happy face. So that's what I'm saying this, because I said peace, heart, and happy face, right? Peace, love, and happiness. Maitreya switched it and said, nope, you got to have love first. Well, remember, sharing is the lowest aspect of love. So you have to have love before we can have peace, and then we'll all be happy. See what I'm saying? And then he said, still alive and well. And there was a cross, and it was signed the Christ. So that was his autograph to me. And that was before I knew any of this information. And if you want to know more about this story in a little greater depth, I have a whole playlist of all my Maitreya experiences that you can listen to too. But yes, that is so true. The world needs love, sweet love now before it can get to peace. But sharing is the manifestation of love on the lowest level. And we can't just say we love each other. We got to prove it, and we got to show it. All right. But thank you for that. And thank you for reminding me of Burt Bacharach. Reminds me of the movie Austin Powers, where Burt Bacharach had those little cameo appearances. But anyway, you have a good day, Zen. All right, next comment. I'll be quick about this one. It says, humanity is Christ himself. Yes, sir, Christ has already come already, and he is now walking on earth again, today through me and you. We never have been separated to the great creator of the universe, only man's negative thought that separates. People must be awakened and realize who they really is, in quotation marks, not are in quotation marks, because we are one. Well, thank you. And I can't make out your name, so I apologize. And I even have my reading glasses on, and I can't really make that out. So too many consonants in your YouTube name. Now, the one thing I do want to say, I do see where you're coming from, and I'm not being critical, okay? But I do want to point this out. There has always been this misunderstanding of the truth of the universal Christ principle. And it is true that the Christ principle lives within the hearts of all of us. I mean, I've spoken about it many times on this channel. Benjamin Creme talked about it, of course. And Maitreya, now speaking on TV, even though he's not declaring himself as Maitreya, is speaking heart to heart to the listener. And it's, according to Benjamin Creme's master, starting to open up people's hearts so they can see, that truth that we all know ourselves to be one, which is that Christ principle within the hearts of all of us, can start to awaken, right? So I see where you're coming from. But here's the thing that I have to say, because there was always this misunderstanding, especially 20 or so years ago, that, when people like myself were talking about Maitreya at various events and stuff like this, people would say, oh, well, we don't need a Christ to come back. We have the Christ in our hearts. Well, I mean, that's true, but at the same time, we do. I mean, what kind of world are we living in? Are we living in a world where everything matches that? Well, of course not. We're living in a world where, people are dying of hunger every day. We're living in a world where we're destroying our environment every single day. We're living in a world with political divisions, economic divisions, war, famine. I mean, all that kind of stuff, right? Absolute, concern about our fellow brothers and sisters, right? So is it manifesting perfectly? Now, here's the thing that I want to say, and I just want to leave it with this, is the reason why Maitreya, along with his group of masters, is coming back now is not only to teach us and show us the way, but also to be our examples. There is an innate instinct in all of us when we are in the presence of that divinity in such pure form to aspire to be it. We might not consciously realize that's what's going on, but it's there. That's the reason why the words of Jesus have lived on for 2,000 years. We might have misunderstood what he said, but they've lived on for 2,000 years. It's the same reason why, up until COVID, millions of people every year travel to Paris to go see this dingy, not very colorful, small little painting called the Mona Lisa that was painted by Leonardo da Vinci. And the reason why people are drawn to it like a moth to a flame is because Leonardo da Vinci was nearly a master. He was so close to being a master when he painted that painting. It's a natural, instinctual kind of call that happens when you see it. So even though Maitreya is not declaring himself as Maitreya, just his simple words are awakening in the hearts of humanity. It might not seem like it now because it's been a real slow process, but it's really because humanity's pretty thick, you know what I mean? And the will and the love and the wisdom of Maitreya is penetrating the hearts of humanity. And eventually it will just get to a tipping point where it will just explode. And there'll be a spiritual explosion. So, and then we will realize that we are one. And then we'll realize that we can't keep, destroying our planet. And we can't keep living in a world where people are going to bed hungry every day. So anyway, hopefully this helps, and I hope everyone has a great day, and I can't wait to put up another video and see what kind of questions you guys have to ask me. All right, you take care, have a great day. Remember to take action and help SOP save our planet. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to talking to you again in future videos.